So this video is going to get into some new project workflows. Specifically, we're interested in being more efficient, making more work. So like speed, efficiency in terms of quantity of work, and quality. We want to make the best work possible. Um, this is roughly based on a lot of practices that were popular and necessary in the 80s and 90s of the previous century, and kind of went out of fashion for a while as we got into our DAWs and just mouse and clicked our way through things, and that have kind of come back into fashion as controllers and other opportunities for using technology have come into the foreground. Specifically, artists like Andrew Huang, Il Gates, and Ahi have posted a lot of tutorials about these kind of different workflows and how we might kind of use them for our own productivity. Let's make sure I have PowerPoint in focus here. So why new workflows? Again, we want to be faster at what we're doing. So we already know what we want to do. We want to get there more efficiently. So that might involve developing new skills. That might involve developing um, kind of efficiencies. Like if we can imagine a sound, we know how to get there faster. If we can imagine an arrangement, we can articulate it more efficiently. This would eventually, and using our time really well, we're actually kind of stealing some ideas from the business world as well. When we bring them into production, our goal is to make it so we can use our time for the creative stuff and really focus on that creativity and not get caught up in the minutia of all the options that are out there in the world. Because it can be very distracting if you're like suddenly like, oh wait, I have to like play with this little detail of the bass sound when I should really be focusing on the arrangement or something like this. We want to make more work. I'll have to find the exact citation on this, but it's pretty much understood that those who produce more work end up producing better work. There was a famous composition exercise that was done at a university maybe 20, 30 years ago, and the professor gave half the class a grade criteria that was those who produce the most work get the highest grade. And on the other class, half of the class was those who produce the best work get the highest grade. Well, as it turns out, those who produced the most work also were the ones that produced the best work. That had a lot to do with um, the quality that comes out of experimenting with all the things, finding out what works, and eliminating the those distractions and failures of second guessing yourself. You want to know if it will work to try this new experimental technique? Great, try it on like 2 or 3 songs, see if it works. If it doesn't, you can drop it. You don't have to think about it again. If it does work, awesome. Use it. Make it happen. Make it part of your daily routine if necessary. So I kind of mentioned flow. In the context of workflow, there's this idea of flow, which is based on Michele Csikszentmihalyi. I'm butchering the pronunciation, but if you Google Csikszentmihalyi, you'll get this author. He wrote a book about the optimal psychology of optimal experience, and you get to that place when you're in the zone, when you like lose track of time, when you're like, oh man, I thought I was only working for like 20 minutes and like 2 hours went by. I just like was in there, just crushing it, doing it, making it happen. That's a place you want to be because amazing things happen when you get there. We already mentioned that time flies, but when you are in flow, you are usually matching your skills and your challenge. So if you can do A, you're doing A plus one. Right? You're pushing yourself a little bit further. And as you consistently and regularly kind of get into the zone by challenging yourself, you might be able to kind of continue challenging yourself and growing and developing yourself further and further and further. And if you can get yourself into this flow state easily, like if you get the hang of putting yourself in a flow state, you might be able to really kind of develop your skills faster and faster. And stuff all ideally compounds and you become kind of amazing at the thing you're doing because you're just in it. You're in it to win it, man. So what are the steps? We're going to explore the idea of exploring, right? In electronic music, you're kind of making new sounds, right? You want to be bringing something new to the equation all the time, which means you're constantly trying out new ideas, trying out new technologies, new like not just like music technologies, but new thought technologies, number theories, music theory, traditional music theory, regular songwriting, experimental songwriting, whatever it might be. you'll try all of the things. As you find the things that work, you exploit them. You put them to work for you, right? You're like, okay, I found that, you know, building everything around the bass drop works brilliantly. Or maybe the bass drop distracts the rest of the production and then you don't really make an awesome build to your bass drop because you're so concerned about specifics of the bass drop that you forget that you need to have some cool stuff going into it to get everyone pumped for the bass drop. Again, I keep on referencing EDM, but I'm just obsessed these days. Right, produce. This is where you polish something. So you explore new ideas, you put them to work for you, you make something. Now you're going to make it better. You're going to take the thing that exists and put some polish on it, right? Maybe taking out some generic stuff that you're like, oh, I'll do a 4 on the floor here, and you'll explore mixing, you'll explore mastering. Um, you'll put the skills that you develop in mixing and mastering to work when you produce a final project. And then finally, you present. That is in business, that's shipping. That's like you have a product, that product goes out the door to customers. Um, this might be for some of us posting on SoundCloud or Beatport or whatever the cool, trendy music sharing site is of the day. But the story of that is you get it out to your audience. For a lot of this is probably going to involve incorporating the song into like a mix or a DJ performance or something like this, because that's kind of how a lot of us are um, getting our creative work out there. All right, so how does this work? It works in a kind of particular context. And I'm assuming that we're working in an electronic music context. Because we might be coming from like a songwriting background where there's a song idea or maybe even a really well-formed song that already exists. I'm thinking of like the Billie Eilish, Phineas kind of relationship where there's song ideas that exist. Some of them are fragments, some of them are complete ideas, and then they work together to develop them. But it's a development based on an existing song. Um, we might be working a little bit differently in our context in the sense of maybe the song doesn't already exist, but we're building sounds or something of this nature. So how does this work? So we're working in a context, right? We're working in a particular aesthetic or something of this nature, and kind of deciding that we're working in that context might be helpful. So I presume that we're working in an electronic music context, and that is where we're interested in new and exciting sounds, and we organize them over time. We might be contrasting that with like a songwriting context, and that is where we have a song, like a verses and choruses and a structure of lyrics and maybe a story to tell. Both of these kind of contexts are awesome and equally valid, I think, but this workflow is specifically focusing on the context of working with sounds in particular and how we might be able to be more efficient if we focus on how we produce sounds versus how we organize the sounds. Um, a big thing of how this works is batching. So you work on similar activities together, so you get kind of streamlined and efficient at working at this activity, right? I kind of think of the metaphor of like, if I'm trying to write an essay and I get halfway through a sentence and then I have to go wash a single dish and then come back and finish the sentence, and then I get a text and I have to respond to that. And then I try to start the next sentence, but I forgot I have to wash not just one dish, but like all of the dishes from dinner or something like this. And then I go start to do that. And then I come back and I try to write another sentence and it's like, oh, like it's impossible to get into that flow state if you're constantly being interrupted to do other types of tasks that, use your body differently or use your brain differently or use your concentration differently, your skills differently. So if we can kind of batch similar activities and similar mindsets into the same process or the same time, we can be much more efficient at doing that task, whatever that task is. So if it's sound designing, let's sound design, do a lot of sound design. If it's mixing, let's do mixing. If we're interrupting like mixing to do sound design, if we're interrupting mixing to do writing, if we're interrupting writing to do mixing and then sound designing, like we're not focused. We're not getting to the thing that we need to achieve to get the song to move forward. Now we're doing things that maybe we should be doing 2 days in the future, or maybe we're working on something that we should have done 2 days in the past. Let's batch the things that go together and do them, use them well. The other concept is commitment. In electronic music, it is so easy to leave all of your options, every last one of them, open until the absolute last second. And I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that is really distracting. Um, having the ability to tweak all this minutia in the sound in the middle of a writing session um, is great and powerful, but it can also be super um, what is that thing? It's where you second guess yourself constantly. You're always like, oh, maybe I should tweak that sound, or oh man, I don't know, I could go back and mess with this little thing a little bit more. Well, it's like, well, is that gonna make it better? Is that gonna make the song better? Like there are certain sounds that have worked perfectly, throughout. I mean, think about how similar kick drum sounds are in the style of music that you work in. Like you don't need to reinvent the wheel there. You can use a kick drum sound, make the song, go back and polish it if there is a need for it. But you may find that like Dylan, Il Gates has mentioned this a lot, that he finds that sounds that would be imperfect all on their own are ideal in the context of a musical piece. So sometimes you have to kind of force yourself to be like, that's the sound, I'm done, committed, I'm working on the other aspects of the music now. The sound part for that feature of the music is done. It's kind of printed to audio. Moving on, let's go forward and do the next thing. All right, let's break this down into a 4-session workflow. First of the sessions, sound design. Again, I'm assuming the EDM kind of fresh new sounds paradigm, right? So we'll get into a little more details of what are involved at each of these stages. Next is composition arrangement. We take those sounds, we arrange them over time, we make interesting musical contexts out of those sounds. Next is mixing. So this is the producing, the polishing of the final product. And then performance. In the case of electronic music, so many of us are getting our music to our audience's ears through some sort of performance. Maybe it's like Riot Music, who performs a launch pad and puts that on YouTube and gets people's attention through a visual kind of performance that doesn't exist on a stage, but the stage, YouTube itself is the stage, right? Sometimes just posting stuff on SoundCloud or Beatport or again, whatever the fashionable thing of the week is, it doesn't necessarily draw audiences to pay attention to it. You might find that giving a performance, yeah, people could be chit-chatting, waiting for the next artist, like if you're an opening act or something like this, but they're there hearing your music. Even if they're not listening at first, they're still hearing it. And if you kind of connect with them somehow, like that, they're there, they hear it, now you have an opportunity to get an audience member. Whereas the noise floor of the internet is kind of, approaching infinity almost. There's so much new content delivered to the internet every day. How does your voice stand out in that context? So performance is one way to bring your voice to the foreground. So let's dig into sound design a little bit. All right, so what are some of the steps? Exploring and capture, right? We're going to experiment with our tools, and some of us could think of this as kind of like a time wasting. We're just playing around, noodling or whatever. Well, yeah, that might be the case. But if you're doing that for its own sake, maybe it's not such a waste of time. Maybe you go, oh man, I really want to explore this tool and really understand it well. What are all the things that I can tweak in it? And maybe I'm really looking for a specific kind of sound. And I know that this tool might be a place to start to get there. Well, great, do that, but also capture it in some way. That might be saving presets. That might be, kind of writing down your what you did and how you did it. But one example that a lot of these EDM producers, Andrew Huang in particular, called out is record those sounds. Record them and mark the recording somehow, so that as you're recording, you actually get those individual like hot spots, because you might be noodling for a while before anything cool happens. If you can mark that hotspot so you can go back and actually get that piece of audio, man, now you're talking, because you might spend 20, 30 minutes playing around with sounds, and you might get, like 30 seconds of cool audio that might be, there might be a cool idea for a riser, a cool idea for a drop. You might find like just an incredible pad or texture or something like this that inspires your next project. And maybe you just collect a bunch of really cool sounds that you can use later. Once you've kind of explored a new sound, recorded some of it, you want to slice it up and sample it into something so that you have those sounds like right at your fingertips. Because now you can start kind of improvising with the sounds, see how they play together, not just like this one sound synthesizer that made a bunch of cool noises. Well, now I can go, well, what does it sound like if I put a beat behind it? Great. Let's use one of those sounds that has a kind of kick quality to it and make a beat, a little simple beat, and then okay, now I can trigger some of the other sounds, see how that plays against each other. Next, you want to organize your sounds in some meaningful way. That might be, let's say, we take some of our sounds that we're going to use, that, especially if they kind of make sense together, we can use these sounds in our next composition project, or we can organize them into musical functions that we might use later. Like some people like to organize their sounds into like the chirps and the scorches and the risers and the sounds that would be good bass drop sounds. Organizing by their like musical function or their emotion, like what kind of tone does this have? What would this sound nice in like a banger? Would this sound nice in like a summer groove or something like this? How are we gonna find those sounds later, right? Because if you're just like when you do the preset thing, you're like, oh, this is my Serum preset number 10, Untitled preset number 11, Untitled preset number 12. What are you going to do the next time you need a sound like the one you already spent time finding? Well, if you've just kind of uncommittedly labeled a bunch of presets, now you're going to have to explore all of those presets or all of the capture session that you did all over again. So you're not using your time well. You've kind of ended up making something that is a waste of time, right? So if you can organize those sounds so that you can go get them based on their musical function, their tone, their vibe, label them as such so that you can go find them when you need them. Now you've used your time well. So prioritizing, we probably want to prioritize what are things we need. Do you have a lot of bass drops already? Maybe we don't need to spend a lot of sound design time on making new bass drops if you already have a lot of great, exciting kind of grooves and beats already. But if you're short on risers, now's the time to prioritize risers. If you're short on like those little embellishments, the ear candy that you kind of put up in the top of your mix, something that just kind of adds some flavor, especially if it's kind of unique to your voice, that makes the whole production a little more you. All right, so we have our amazing sounds, and now we're going to start putting them together. We're going to arrange them over time, right? Because that's kind of what music is, right? It's if there wasn't things changing over time, music would just be like some drones and some occasional like smacky bang bang noises, which there probably is music out there like that. I don't mean to belittle that kind of music, but I think what makes us excited about sound is the way it kind of keeps us engaged. I'm really thinking of really compelling buildups into drops and how that sort of lets us know something exciting is about to happen, right? It's coming soon. It's 32 bars away. It's 16 bars away. It's 4 bars away. Oh my goodness. Wait a minute. There's a 2-bar fill of like a vocal sample or something weird, and then a entirely new palette just explodes into our ears. This is where things get cool, right? Or if you're writing songs, you're organizing your sounds over time so that you're kind of reinforcing the story of the song or bringing out an emotional tone or an idea in the song that could be missed in the lyrics. But if you get your sounds right, it kind of creates a connection between the lyrical content and the energy, whether it's bright or dark or something like this, and the musical sounds. Like, so some artists can pull off the seemingly haphazard lyrics go in one direction and music goes another, and other artists can really make us feel something by putting those lyrics and the production, like how the sounds are arranged, into a package that makes sense, that kind of resonates with us. So if you're using song form, you want to be cognizant of how you're arranging things over time. If you're using the build and drop kind of paradigm, you want to make sure that you're, making proper build-ups, perhaps. And then, of course, the extra that I was mentioning in the sound design section, we want to add more than just the rudiments of a build and drop, fade out, right? Or verse, chorus, verse, bridge, verse, verse, chorus, chorus, right? We want to do more than just get the song done. We want to bring the cool thing that's in our voice to the music so that, it's different than what someone, your neighbor, your collaborator's doing, right? What makes your particular song or production yours, right? So mixing, let's get to it. Ideally, at this stage, we start rendering things to stems. This is one of those commitment phases where we take the MIDI arrangements or the arrangement of samples and we commit that track to a block of audio that's no longer automated, it's audio, right? This gives us a lot of ability to make fine-tuned edits because we can actually cut quite precise in time, which we couldn't necessarily do when we were doing had all those automation curves. It also allows us to do some like really refined level management, whereas when things were still fluid, we might accidentally get a little overlap between two bass tones, and that would cause all sorts of mixing problems. Well, now that we're in the mixing stage, we can commit that to audio, fine tune that edit, and no longer have level collisions. So we can actually get our levels like as tight as possible. And this is also an opportunity to get into like the spectrum of the style of music that you're trying to produce. So you might take some reference tracks, throw it in your session with your mix, and go like, okay, I want my, builds to kind of sound like Flux Pavilion, and I want my drops to sound kind of like world bass. I want that organic feel, but I want that kind of alien spaceshipy kind of sound over the top of it. Well, how does that all mix together in terms of a spectrum? Like, is it heavy on the bass and light on the treble, or is it even like, the real kind of brosed up banger stuff, like has that real even like sub bass and high frequency content so that it sounds loud but also clear. Like we don't, like I'm sure you've been to either in a bad car stereo situation or a show where the things are mixed so heavy on the bass that you actually can't hear the vocals or you can't hear elements of the music that you actually are there to hear. Besides, I mean, we all love to have that sternum vibrating experience, but there's other stuff that keeps our brain kind of excited about the context of that bass experience. So this is the time to kind of identify those things, like where can we mix in the spectrum, um, where can we make our EQ adjustments, our level adjustments, and also a little bit of spatialization. Like, do we have our vocals dead center, like right with the drums, or do we have them pushed out to the sides a little bit? So when we're put on headphones, we really get that, like, oh, the vocals are like over here, right? Kick drum, drum kit, all the basses are right here in the center, kind of like right in our head or right in our body. But some of those other embellishments and vocals and like top effects and things like that, those go out to the sides. Even the top voicing of your basses might go out to the sides so that they kind of are distinct in distinct spaces, kind of whether it's all the way to the edges or kind of up down. These are things that you can play with when you get to that level of mixing. All right, I had to switch machines there real quick. So mixing, we already got through mixing, spectrum of space. So we talked about the all of those things you can do with EQ, a little bit of side mix, mid side EQ, and getting the sounds out to the side while keeping certain things centered in your mix. Let's get into performance. So performance. There's a lot of ways that we can deliver our music in a live context. And I guess I'm building on simple playback where you're playing back one track, then fading it to the next track, and maybe dancing and doing some like minor tweaking, which I find people who are dancing to their own music are probably some of the best performers in the sense that they know what exciting part is coming up, and you can feel that energy in their movement. So when they get to the exciting part, they're like super committed, and you're like, there's a contagious kind of vibe there. So one of the ways we can perform our music is mix minus one. So we take the existing record production mix and we take out like whatever component we're performing. I like to think of it as like the lead vocal or the lead melody part or something of this nature. This would be something that we'd be performing kind of all the way through. And the cool thing about doing mix minus one is you can use your production section, especially if you've done all your stems and you've mixed everything down as best you can use the same effects processing chain for your live performance as that's in your recording. That way, like people who are familiar with your recorded work are going to hear the best and most consistent performance when you're live because it's going to sound like those effects. Um, it's kind of like a cool approach that is something you can do almost entirely on your own. You don't need to have like a whole sound crew or something like this. Laptop, playback, uh, sound system, so that there's someone who's just like turning the sound system on for you or something like that, and then you've got control your vocals through your DAW or something like this. Another approach is to break it down a little bit more granularly and have like segments that you trigger, and then things like hits that you trigger, like drum fills that you can trigger live, and other like all the embellishments and stuff you can actually add live. And if you are concerned about like maybe the amount of failure that you could introduce by cutting things up, you could make it such that your embellishments and lead parts will play live, will play actually pre-recorded unless you do something, unless you trigger something, and then that triggered sound will gate the pre-recorded sound, so you hear the live version and the non-live version just goes to silence. Another approach is like you can break all your stems for your final track into the constituent parts. Like you have your drum parts and your bass parts and your chords and all of these things, and then you can make new arrangements by putting together things live, and then you can still perform on top of that. You could play a song segment and then sing on top of that or something like this. You could still be using the gates and the tape kind of concept where you're gating out other sounds. Like if there's a drum fill that's in the recording and you want to do a more like insane version live, you could perform that in with either you could use your typewriter keyboard, frankly, unless you have something that's like velocity sensitive, like a Launchpad Pro or a keyboard or something like this, a MIDI keyboard. Um, and then you could go like full in, like where nothing happens unless you perform it. You're using a concept called controllerism, which is kind of built on the idea of turntablism. Where they play two turntables and they have like two sounds that are just like single chords. But like there's that guy who does the what is it, the Imperial March, with two records that neither of them have anything of the Imperial March on them, but he plays the records. What's that thing where you spin the record just a little bit slower, a little bit faster, and it changes the pitch. So you get that Imperial March kind of underlying melody through sounds that are not classical music sounds per se. Um, if you build on that kind of concept of taking fragments and putting them together in real time, like with extreme dexterity and virtuosity, you could be a controllerist and perform live with no pre-recorded material. I mean, other than the little sound samples and synthesizer loops and these sorts of things. So some more thoughts on this. Something that's really cool about the whole process of breaking things down into the at least four kind of segments is when you're doing that batched context, you can really focus on skill development within that context. So you're getting much better at sound design, like really understanding the tools that your synthesizers, your effects processes, these sorts of things. So much so that if you're in the writing stage later and you're like, oh man, I just need to tweak the sound a little bit to get it to like gel compositionally. Well, you already know exactly what you're going to do to make that happen. You're not going to waste half an hour and get out of the zone exploring. You already know how to get that result. You just go click, 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 boom, bam, you're back into the writing stage. So you've developed that sound design skill to the point where it's portable. You now can call upon that skill in tight contexts where you maybe previously could not do it. Another cool thing about this 4-session kind of workflow is that you're not necessarily using the same DAW for everything, right? There's cost reasons and there may be some value in doing that, but also think about the tools that you've encountered, like the big chunk of metal at the end of a handle. It's really good for smashing stuff, but if you have a screw that you need to tighten, um, the smashy hammer device just isn't the right tool. It can smash a piece of screw into a piece of wood, no problem, but that's not a very efficient use of the tool, and it will destroy the wood and the screw. Whereas a screwdriver, it's like, oh yeah, very easy to use that tool for that task. Whereas like if I'm trying to get a nail into a board or pull a nail out of a board, the screwdriver is not the great tool for it. The hammer is the necessary tool. Um, you can think of uh, for those of you who have not played around with all of the different tools, I can say with some limited experience that there are certain tools that I just love using for sound editing. I used to really, really, really like Pro Tools for sound editing. For whatever reason, I started doing sound editing in Live, and now I'm sort of hooked and can't not use Live. It's weird, um, but you may find that certain tools. I was thinking of Fruity Loops the other day, FL Studio. Sorry, it has this grace note effect, so it can turn any um, it can add a pitch envelope to any synthesizer, which is something I don't have easy access to in my other tools. I would have to use PitchBend or something of this nature to make that happen with my other tools. Whereas FL Studio, it's built right into the notation, the piano roll, so easy to use. Um, other things, Maximus P, very valuable for generating sounds and creating a performance controller system. It is not my tool of choice for arranging a song. It's really just not built for that. You can trick it into becoming a DAW effectively through really weird workarounds, but it's just not built for that. It's open-ended, so it lets you do other cool stuff. Um, I found sometimes when I'm working with Live that I find the grid a little bit annoying, where it assumes musical time, like quarter notes and stuff. When I'm editing vocals, especially because I have a bad stutter, so I'll go back and probably edit some of this. I find that I need a better resolution. So I end up zooming in so far that I lose track of the general waveforms when I'm just trying to like chop out a little redundant D somewhere in the mix. Um, so that was something that I really miss from my Pro Tools days. Was like I could just at any point, bam, get in that little segment. Now the particulars of the zoom tool in Live let me go in and out pretty fast, so I'm not complaining too much. But it is nice to take advantage of a tool that does a particular task easier than another tool. Um, for example, sound design. There's tools that are better at sound design. Mixing, arranging. There are tools that are better at mixing and arranging. Your performance tools. Live, Max MSP. These are my two favorites. I used to use MainStage a lot because that had all of the sounds that I used to use in Logic. They were already right there in MainStage, and when I wanted them in that performative context, MainStage was just sitting there ready for me to work, and I didn't have to reinvent the wheel per se. Um, the other really cool thing about breaking things into this kind of segmented workflow of sound design and mixing, producing, arranging as separate activities is that now you've opened up the ability to collaborate with people more easily, right? Let's say you're working with someone who is working in Pro Tools, you're working in FL Studio or Live or whatever your DAW is. When you go to the stage of production where they would be the ideal person to be working with, render your stuff as audio, hand it over. Now we're in Pro Tools. No big deal. We're already thinking in this mindset of like, at the end of this work session, we render things as audio and just go work with it. It doesn't matter that they're in Pro Tools and you're in some other tool. Once it's audio, all the tools are available to you. Um, also, when you think about the segmented things, you're also kind of segmenting your work time. So you're spending time where maybe you need to work alone on the part of the product that needs to be done alone. And then you can work on the part of the project that is really about collaborating. Like maybe writing is your collaborative stage where like you have melodic ideas and you work with someone who has really great chord ideas, and another creative in your group is like a super like sound design like genius, right? That's when you want the everyone kind of like working together. And then mixing, maybe each of you has a different mix in your head, or maybe you need to work together for the mix. Who knows? But by separating things into these different phases, you don't leave people behind, right? Like if everyone comes to the mixing session and the arrangement is in, we originally arranged it in Logic, for example, but we're going to be doing the mix on a PC. Bam, we print it as audio. We all get together. Boom, we're working on that PC. Easy, no problems. So reflection and action. Thinking about this idea of like our 4 session workflow mindset, you can think of like what areas of those 4 sessions are we like, where are your strengths? Are your strengths in arrangement? Are your strengths in mixing? Are your strengths in sound design? Awesome. Where are your weaknesses, right? Can you identify where you want to develop more skills? Or can you develop them on your own with our training programs and these sorts of things? Or are you going to be more efficient at developing those skills if you're working together with other people on that same kind of project, right? This kind of batching of work into different tasks maybe allows you to really focus in on that skill set. So if you really want to focus on mixing, um, and you have a song that is written out, you don't need to start worrying about arranging anymore. Let's just focus on mixing, right? The song's written, right? It's arranged. That part's done. We're not going to go back and screw around with it. Let's just mix. Let's work on those mix skills. If there's a vocal that's slightly weird, and you don't have an auto tuner to fix it, that's not your problem right now. You are going to focus on all of the things that you can focus on. Yeah. And if you think about some of the past recorded music, there's a lot of like goof ups that didn't get checked. So maybe we don't need to go, hyper surgical on everything. Like you could probably find it on Watch Mojo or one of these YouTube channels, but um, there are records out there like Hey Jude. I think it's Paul McCarthy, one of the um, artists in the Beatles, actually kind of messes up, plays the wrong chord, and then swears. Like if you listen closely, there's a curse word in that song that was not marked as having a curse word in it. It's very quiet. It's in the background, so it's not like anyone notices. But it's there. There's a mess up in that very successful, popular song. So sometimes once you've committed, there might be weird things in there, but you can't let that get in your way of moving forward, right? And if you're making enough songs, if we find that mistake becomes an actual problem in the song, just let the song go, man. You've got 50 songs now. Um, we can really, hopefully through this process, start to commit to finishing projects. I know that's, for me anyway, like a major headache is I've got a deadline coming up. I need to deliver something. And I've got like 5 projects in the works. And, I pick away at one, you know, but it's like the arrangement's not great. So I don't want to mix it yet because I'm still arranging it. I pick away at another and I'm like, I don't like the sound design. It's not there yet. Um, if if I have everything, all the layers, all the way down to the initial sounds open to me, I can really start screwing around again and not just be like, you know what, the sound design isn't perfect, but I'm going to move forward and I'm going to finish this and then make judgments and then be the critic later. Get through it. Make something meaningful. You'll probably learn along the way. Oh, there's this thing that I do. I get lazy and I do this and it screws up my production. Great. Now that you know what that is, that's your weakness. Now you can focus on it, right? But you don't have to get caught up in every step of every production, at every step of every production. Focus on the ones that make you go forward and the ones that get in your way and pull you back, let them go. So there's a lot of like kind of philosophy, head thinky stuff. So I think we need to pick out 3 things about this workflow and try them within the next week, whether it's here in this program or when you get home, but commit to a week of trying working in this mindset of like segmenting your workflow into different batchable um, production sessions, right? Whether even if it's using the same exact DAW where you do a save as, and now we are in mix mode. So that's put away in case you really need to get back to it. But now you're in the mode of mixing. That's it, right? You don't mess with the sound design unless it's little things that you can focus on in the mixing stage. Once you've done this for at least a week, then you can reflect on, okay, does this help my workflow? Does it help me build skills? Are there areas that this makes things go faster? Are there areas where this makes things work better? Are there areas where this allows me to make more good work? Awesome. What about the areas that aren't quite lining up for me yet? What areas am I lacking particular skills, right? What do I not know? What do I now know that I don't know, that I didn't know before? This is now the time where you can kind of reflect back on that and figure out what it is you want to work on to get better next week. So, in addition to that kind of assignment thing of like, let's go put this to work, I wanted to point out some resources where some of these ideas were drawn from. Specifically, 4 books: Flow, The Psychology of Optimum Experience by Mikhaili Csikszentmihalyi. Sorry again on the pronunciation. Um, this book kind of goes through that whole like skill to challenge matching, being in the zone, this sort of thing. It's brilliant read. It's pretty fun read and hopefully inspirational. A more step-by-step book is Algorithms to Live By. This really gets into computer science ideas and how you can use them in real life, even outside of computer science. So the explore, exploit concept really came from that computer science kind of mindset of like, let's explore computer coding. Now let's put that coding to work on a project that actually makes money or something like this. Um, the One Thing is a book that asks the question, what could you do right now that would help you in the future such that you wouldn't have to do a bunch of these other BS tasks, or it would make those tasks easier to do, right? For some of us, it might be like maybe it's writing the song before we start producing it. It's a lot easier to produce a song once it's written. Or in electronic music, it's easier to arrange sounds over time if we have sounds which we can arrange. So that book is great at just kind of asking that question, getting you to think about that in the context of whatever it is you're doing. And it comes from a business world. A lot of these books have their roots in business, but they come back and help us in the arts and the creative practice because ultimately, if we are if success is if we get to the level of success that we want to be at, we are going to be in the music business. So it helps to know something about at least business mindsets, not just like the business negative mindset, but like the cool, productive business mindset. Atomic Habits is the last book I want to reference. This book kind of builds back towards flow in the sense that are there little things that you can do every day that build up and accumulate into something awesome? And I'm thinking of, in particular, Jonathan Mann. He's the guy who's written like over 4,000 songs. He started in January of 2009 and has written a song every day since. He's got like a um, Guinness Book of World Records for most consecutive song days in a row. Uh, when you look at his work, he's got more songs than I think most of us will have in a lifetime. And he's, I don't think he's even 40 yet. He's probably 39 at this point. Um, so that's something that, when you do something every day, imagine building a skill every day. Like if you don't know music theory, you work on it a little bit every day. And then after 2 years goes by, suddenly you're the most music theory knowledgeable person in your entire production collaborative group. So when people need like chord ideas or something that to make their production better in a musical sense, you're the person they call. You're the one that gets the check. Yeah. There are at least 3 videos that this talk is drawn from. One is Andrew Huang talking about sound design, separating sound design from production and writing. Um, Another is He. He talks about mixing. He's got a couple videos mixing and mastering using this free plugin for Ableton called Span. It's a spectral analyzer that is keyed up to perceptual spectral analyzer. So it's not just the physical um, curve that we see in our EQs, but it's like what we perceive. And he's figured out, and he's studied with some other cats and figured out really efficient ways to use that tool to get your mix to master well and also cut through and be really clean and crisp and loud in your, both live and on headphones. And then the ill methodology by Dylan Lane / Ill Gates. This is a pretty old video, but it brings home a lot of the concepts in here of like, there are other people who had workflows that are different than the ones that maybe we already have that were very productive in the past. That what can we learn from them and apply to our workflow? Also, he gets really into some of the mindset things. Like he has a degree in psychology, so his brain is tuned to be aware of the things that go on in people's brains that make them successful and the things that maybe get in our way. And secretly, some of this talk is about psychology more and human development more than it is about technology per se. So I'm hoping that maybe if you didn't pick that up from this talk, that you can go back, pull up some of these resources and tie that back to your kind of musical productive lifestyle, that you're incorporating not just technology in the sense of nuts and bolts and code, but concept technology that you can put to work for you long term. When this piece of technology is obsolete, the technology you have up here keeps on growing and keeps on improving. So I think with that, we'll call it an end, and we'll post. My plan is to have these links to the videos and the books in the after lecture documents, so you can, if you want to do your more homework, you can dig into it. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.